All right, Shabbos, say good morning, and really exciting and beautiful daf ahead of us today. Beginning by thanking all of our sponsors, to thank our TALMUD TORAH sponsors for the month of Teves. The Daf Yomi Shiur for dedicating the Shiurim this month in memory of Mr. Milton Marder, Mordechai Dovid and Rephael HaKohen. To thank Shirley Elbaum Family for dedicating the Shiurim and Joshua's this month, creation of the yahrzeit of Gerald Elbaum, Yaakov Kopel, R Avraham Menachem. And to thank our week of learning sponsors, Ayal Sara Steinberg and the zechus of refuah shelaimah for Shulamis Susha. We hope that on the merit of our TALMUD TORAH, the neshama, and aliyah, the families in neshama, and all those who require a refuah should have one together with Kol Cholei Yisrael. Now, with that, let us begin. Today's daf is Samech Vav 66, and we are picking up at or on Samech Hemebez 65b. An incredible Gemara ahead of us today. So we are picking up at the Mishnah on the bottom of Samech Hemebez, last Mishnah on the daf. Poschin la'adam b'ksuvas ishto. So we'll say, remember again, this entire time what we're focusing on, same topic, about what is a legitimate Pesach, right? What is a legitimate opening in order to allow for hataras nedarim, annulment of vows. So poschin la'adam b'ksuvas ishto. You could create a Pesach for a man through the ksuva of his wife. It was an interesting case. What's the case? Here, watch this. There was once a guy who made a neder that ultimately, again, that his wife can't get hana from him, or that he can't get hana from his wife. Now, both say a neder like that, by definition, triggers divorce. Because again, if a husband makes a neder that he's not going to get benefit for his wife, or not give benefit to his wife, so the mice again, intimacy becomes prohibited. Certain interactions become prohibited. So that triggers divorce. That triggers divorce. Now, so what happened? Now, this lady had a generous ksuva. She had a ksuva of 400 dinarim. Okay. So the husband went to Beis Din to finalize the divorce. And Rabbi Akiva said, okay, you owe a ksuva of 400 dinarim. Amar lo Rebbe. He said, the husband says, Rebbe, ches meos dinarim hiniach abba. You know, my father died. He left behind an estate of 800 dinarim. So what happened? Notal achi dalid meos. My brothers took 400 dinarim as their inheritance. Vani dalid meos. And all I have, I got 400 dinarim. So my entire inheritance, and apparently this guy didn't have money of his own, my entire inheritance ultimately again is 400 dinarim. So the Gemara says, so lo dai shatitol hi masayim bani masayim. So the husband was saying to Rabbi Akiva, listen, at least, help me reach a settlement, right? Give my wife 200 dinarim, my soon-to-be ex-wife 200 dinarim, and I'll give 200 dinarim. If I have to pay her all 400 dinar, then what? I walk out of this marriage penniless. Amar Rabbi Akiva, afilu ata mocher se'ar roshecha. A great line. Rabbi Akiva says, even if you have to sell the hair on your head, you do what you have to do to give her the ksuva. Which essentially means Rabbi Akiva says, sorry, no luck. You owe her 400 dinar. That is the ksuva. That's it. There is nothing more to talk about. Amar lo, so listen to this. The guy says, had I known that I was really going to have to pay her a ksuva of 400 dinar, lo hayisi noder. I would have never made this neder. So as I will say, the guy understood that the neder was going to trigger divorce. But he thought that in the divorce settlement, he could get away with somehow paying just 200 dinar. He never thought that he would be stuck with the complete 400 dinar amount. So essentially he says, had I known, I would have never paid. I would have never made the neder. So what happens? V'iti Rabbi Akiva. I will say ultimately again, Rabbi Akiva permitted the neder based on this. And as Rabbi said, this was a Pesach. Had I known then that I would really be obligated to pay the full ksuva, I would have never made the neder. Rabbi Akiva said, that is a Pesach, right? That creates effective charata, and therefore ultimately again the neder is annulled. Incredible story. Says the Gemara, here's what's interesting. What the Gemara is actually focused on is the hairline, right? Not the hairline, right? But the hairline. In other words, Rabbi Akiva is saying to the guy, even if you have to sell your hair, right, you have to go out and pay the ksuva. The Gemara says, really? The Gemara says, metalkli mi mishtabdi the ksuva. Actually, I'm sorry, before we get there. So we'll say, so here's what's interesting. The guy said to Rabbi Akiva, my father left me 400 dinarim. Now, I will say the assumption is that literally again he left him 400 dinarim, like cash or metaltalin. So I will say, the Gemara says, I don't understand metaltalin mean mishtavli l'ksuvasa. Our metaltalin movable property, I will say in general, a ksuva only encumbers real property. A ksuva doesn't encumber movable property. So technically speaking, if he's got 400 dinarim of inheritance of metaltalin, that would not be meshubah to the ksuva. To which the Gemara says, dinar. So I'll say, no, because at the end of the day, actually what his father left him was not metaltalin, but rather was what? Was actual property, was actual land. Okay, so real estate is going to be meshubah to the karka. It's meshubah to the ksuva. But Rabbi Akiva said to the guy, to the husband, even if you have to sell the hair on your head, you are obligated to do so. Now we'll say, hair is metaltalin, right? Metaltalin. So how does Rabbi Akiva say to him that you even have to sell the hair on your head? Hachi kamar, afilu ata mocher se'ar roshecha va'ochal. No, we'll say Rabbi Akiva meant like this. Rabbi Akiva was saying to the husband, listen, you have to pay the whole ksuba, which means even if you have to use the entire inheritance in order to pay the ksuba, you are obligated to do so. You're not going to have any money left for yourself. Rabbi Akiva says, okay, sell your hair. Sell your hair, that way you'll have money for your own food. So he wasn't telling the husband, sell your hair in order to pay the ksuva. What was he telling the husband? Sell your hair so that what? You'll be able to take care of yourself. You'll have money from somewhere. To which the Gemara says, this is fascinating. Shams mina. I will say, but what do you see from this? Ein mesadrin lebalchov. So I will say, this is actually fascinating. What do you see from this, says the Gemara? That halacha l'maisa, when it comes to paying a ksuva debt, we do not care about how the debtor is going to sustain himself after the debt. I was supposed to say, this is an interesting halachic and also like hashkafa question. Someone owes money. They have enough money to pay the debt. But we know that once they pay the debt, what's going to happen? They're penniless. So there is an interesting machlokes. So I take a look at the first line of the Ran. Shamis mina ein mesadron lebalchov. Plukti beperak amakabel. Ikamandar demanichin lo mita umapos ukleim naso. Mosin yud beis chodesh. The Gemara miyak yakim erchin. Vikamandar ein mesadron. So here's the shaila. When a person has money and he's going to pay off a debt, do we make sure that even after the paying off of the debt, he has at least enough money to live? Or do we say, no, not our problem. You owe the debt, you have the money to pay the debt, and what your financial situation is after payment of the debt is simply not our problem. So we'll say that's a machlokes. We call the machlokes misajun lebalchov or misajun. Misajun means like seder. Do we worry about the financial health of the debtor after he pays the debt? And therefore we'll say what that would mean is maybe we restructure repayment a little bit differently. In other words, we'll say, so maybe instead of having him pay an entire life lump sum, we go ahead and we put him on a payment plan so that he's paying over a certain amount of time, but at least like this, he has what he needs to live. Or do we say, no, truth is, not our problem. Not our problem. So we'll say, so the Gemara says, what do you see from here? The fact that Rabbi Akiva said, remember again, we'll say, the husband in this case, what was he saying? If I pay off the ksuva, then what? I'm penniless. I have nothing. What did Rabbi Akiva say to him? Sell your hair. And I will say, now, by the way, sell your hair is the Talmudic equivalent of what? Go fly a kite, right? Go fly a kite. Sell your hair. So, in other words, what Rabbi Akiva was saying is, listen, essentially, not my problem. Which I will say, by the way, isn't it such an interesting thing how sometimes in life people have a problem, people have a challenge, and I will say that sometimes the reflexive reaction is, what could we do to help? You have a problem, what can we do to help? And I will say, sometimes in life, the way you have to approach other people's problems is, you need to figure it out. I can't help. I'm sorry. It's hard because essentially when we're young and idealistic, we want to fix everything and we want to fix everyone. I want to have a solution to everything. And I think as we get older, we recognize, I can't solve your problems. I'm sorry. You borrowed the money, right? In this case, right? You have an obligation. you have to make good, and you're just going to have to figure this out. Now, conversely, I think most of us know, because all of us have kind of been in situations like that, where we've had a problem, maybe turned to someone for help, and the response we got was, go figure it out. And you know what the incredible part is? Some of the greatest life growth comes from figuring it out. As much as that hurts, when sometimes you feel like you needed help, and you didn't get the help, what you get from having to rely on yourself and figure it out are they're moments of personalistic, explosive personalistic growth. Because now, I have to figure it out. There's no lifeline. There is absolutely no one on the other end. But I have to do this on my own. So we'll say, it says pretty incredible. So Gemara says, Rabbi Akiva seemed to be of the opinion, no, pay it back, not our problem. The Gemara says, no. R Avraham by Yitzchak, Lomar, top of Samech Vav, Shein Mekar Shtachel. The Gemara says, no, not necessarily. In other words, it could be that we hold Misajin L'Balchov. And perhaps what Rabbi Akiva was saying when he said, sell your hair was look. In other words, we'll say, what was the husband trying to accomplish in this case? Right? Remember again, what was his objective? Reduction of the ksuva amount. Right? What Rabbi Akiva was saying is, listen, we are not reducing the ksuva amount. So again, we could figure out the payment plan. But in other words, when Rabbi Akiva said, go sell your hair might not mean pay the whole amount right now. Go sell your hair means the ksuva, we're not reducing anything. This is what you owe. We can figure out how you can pay it in a way that doesn't sink you. But Lamaisi, you're still obligated to pay. So Rabbi says, what the Gemara is suggesting over here is just, there's this sugi itself doesn't point in either direction on the sugi of Emisaj and Bachos. Therefore, Rabbi say, what we come out with over here is another form of Pesach, right? That you could create a Pesach ultimately again with the ksuva of one's wife. So Rabbi say that's the din of the Mishnah. And halacha, so Rabbi say we also learn about a fascinating machlokes about Misaj and the Balchov or ein Misaj and the Balchov. So Rabbi say, so just a fundamental machlokes: do we worry about the financial health of the debtor after he pays back the debt or not? That's a fundamental machlokes. But ultimately, again, that machlokes is not really resolved or not really addressed. Ultimately, through our Mishnah. We'll give you an interesting maramakom. There is a fascinating rush. The first rush on the daf over Samach Vav Amid Aleph. Again, we'll say it just says Kilomar the olam mesajid lebachol vachi kamarle the olam ata chayiv lifro l'ksuva mikol nechazim shiavol yadecha va'afilu ata mocher seroshecha. So we'll say, so again, you'll read the rest of the rush. It's very interesting. But the rush is saying, could be that Rabbi Akiva wasn't saying that we're going to force you to pay everything right now and therefore you'll have no money to live on. What Rabbi Akiva was just saying is, your attempt to reduce the ksuva is not going to work. We'll figure out again what you need to sell, how you can sell a property, while at the same time living. Okay, Mishnah. But I'll say, great case. Poschin b'yamim tovim b'shabbasos. Listen to this Erev Shabbos case. Great. You could create a Pesach with Yom Tov and Shabbos. Now we'll say, what does that mean? Let's see. Now, first of all, you can actually take a look at the Ran. Top Ran. Suppose in Yom Tovim, Shomrim Lo, Ila Hayisi Oder, Sha'asur Leitztar B'Shabbos, Hayiso Noder. So we're going to see, let's say a guy makes a neder that he's not going to eat meat or drink wine. And then we tell him, listen, now he comes to Shabbos, right? And he realizes, eating meat and drinking wine is such an important part of Shabbos. So we say to him, or Yom Tov for that matter, had you realized that you would cause yourself such tsar by missing out on Onik Shabbos, enjoyment of Shabbos, Simchas Yom Tov, pleasure of Yom Tov, would you have made this neder? And if he says no, that creates a proper Pesach. So that's what it means. Poschin b'yom tovim b'shabbosos. B'rishona, now we'll say, so that's the case. Now in the beginning, hayu omrim, osan hayamim mutarin, ushar kol yamim asurim. Now we'll say, watch, let's play this out for just a second. I make a neder. And in my neder, I say, I'm not going to eat meat or drink wine. Then what happens? I come to Beis and I say, you know what? It's Shabbos and it's Yom Tov. I'm going to miss out on all the wonderful enjoyment of Shabbos and Yom Tov. So what happens? The Beis says to me, well, had you realized that you would miss out on Oneg Shabbos and Simchas Yom Tov, would you have made the neder? And I say, had I known then what I know now, I would not have made the neder. Beautiful. We'll say, what is that called? That's called the Pesach. That allows for that. So we'll say, so now the shaila is, so what's revoked? So in the beginning, they thought, what's revoked? Shabbos and Yom Tov. So now I could eat meat on Shabbos and Yom Tov, but the neder is still in effect for what? For the rest of the time. Ad Sheba Rabbi Akiva, until Rabbi Akiva came along and he said, "V'limin ani taught no neder shan neder shehoter mechlalo hoter kulo." It was until Rabbi Akiva came along and Rabbi Akiva said, "Not true." Rabbi Akiva taught that a neder, once you permit part of it, the entire time. I was say a neder is an all or nothing proposition. Either you're bound by the neder or you're not. There's no such thing as being released from components of the neder. So once there is a Pesach for Shabbos and Yom Tov, the entire neder falls away. Shan neder shehutar mechlalo hutar kulo. Once some component of the neder is nitar, becomes permitted, the entire neder falls away. So I'll say, what's the case? Here it is. Konam. So he gives an example. I will say, the Gemara is giving an example of neder shehutar mechlalo hutar kulo. Once part of the neder becomes part of the whole, how do you? So what's an example? This Amar konam she'ini neder lekulchem. Let's listen to this. Right, I make a neder to this group. Right, konam. I make a neder that I'm not going to get hana. Right, I'm not going to give hana any neder lekulchem. I'm not going to give hana to any of you. Hutar echer mehem. So we'll say if I do hatar nedarim, I revoke the neder for one of the members of the group. Then what? So hutar kulan. Ultimately, again, everyone becomes permitted. That's the example, because I will say why. I made the neder to a group. Once one part of the group becomes mutter, by definition, the entire neder falls away. Sheni neneh lezeh ulezeh. I will say, however, what if I say, I take a neder, I'm not going to get hana from you, and from you, and from you, and from you. Then what? Hutar arishon, hutar kulan. Hutra acharon, ha'achron, whatever kulan asuran. So we'll say this is interesting. We actually had this case before. So we'll say there's a discussion in the rush over here. How exactly I'm phrasing this? Am I saying I make a neder not to get hana from you? Does it have to be and from you, and from you, and from you, or is it just from you, from you, from you, from you, from you? Either way, the Mishnah seems to say that what I'm doing is I'm linking all of the nedarim together. One is linked to the other, and therefore I will say what happens. If I go ahead and I know the neder that I made to the first guy, then what? It's like a domino effect. Everyone becomes permitted. However, hutra acharon, if I only do ataras nedarim for the last guy, then what? Ha'acharon mutar v'kulan asurin. Ultimately, only the last guy is mutar, but again, his release from the neder doesn't affect anyone before him in the chain. Similarly, in the parentheses, hutra amsoi he'menu ulamata mutar he'menu ulamala asar. I will say, if I go ahead and I do ataras nedarim for the guy in the middle, then what I will say? That affects him and what? Everyone below him, but everyone above him, so to speak, is unimpacted. Shigmar says, Shani neder zekarban ula zekarban. So we'll say, so what happens if I say, listen to this. I say, right, Ruvain, I'm not nened. You are to me like a carbon. Shimon, you are to me like a carbon. Right, Levi, you are to me like a carbon. So I'll say, what am I doing in this case? I'm making a separate lashon of neder to each of these guys. Then what? Pesach l'chol echad ve'echad. Then I will say, they're not linked. They each have their own independent neder or sirhana, and therefore again I need a Pesach, I need a hatara for each of them individually. Konam yain shani toim. We'll say listen to this case. Great cases. Konam shani toim. So let's do this. I make a neder. Wine is konam to me. I'm not going to taste wine. Why? Shayayin rala me'ayim. Because wine is bad for the intestines, for the stomach. Now I will say, so what am I doing in this case? I'm making a neder, but I'm explicitly articulating why I'm making the neder, right? I went to my doctor, he tells me I'm having some stomach issues, he didn't tell me not to drink wine, but I went on WebMD, I saw, right, that again, that wine is bad for the stomach, so I'm making a neder, I'm not going to drink wine because wine is bad for the stomach. Okay, Amrulo, so I'm at the Kiddush, and they tell me, V'haloha miyushin yafal, by the way, aged wine is actually very good for the stomach. So we'll say, what's the halacha? Chuter b'miyushan. I'm allowed to drink aged wine. Not only am I allowed to drink aged wine, but what? But rather, rather we'll say I'm allowed to drink all wine. Now we'll say, what's happening over here? I will say, now in this case what we're going to see is Good. Yes. Okay. We'll see the explanation of this case. But I will say this is going to be a little bit different because this really seems to go back to what we're talking about a neder betos, right? About a mistaken neder. That's really what's happening over here, right? Again, in other words, I made a neder with a certain body of knowledge. Actually, with a certain assumption. What was my assumption? That wine is bad. I find out that wine is not bad. Therefore, the Gemara says ultimately again that the neder falls off. Now again, I will say that type of neder, remember again, is annulled even without a revocation process. It's not annulled. It's just what? It's just void. It's just void. There's no revocation process because as we saw in yesterday's daf, a neder betos is just not a neder. A mistaken neder is not a neder. Okay, let's go back there. So the Gemara says, Konam basal shani toim shabatzal radalev. I'm not going to eat onions. I hereby make a neder. Onions are konam to me because onions are bad for the heart. Amrulo, halo kufri yafal alev. Then I hear some information about the kufri onion is actually very good for the heart. So we'll say, what's the halacha? Hutar b'kufri. I'm allowed to eat kufri onions. Not only that, below b'kufri bilvad hutar. Not only kufri onions, ella b'chala b'tzalim. I'm actually allowed to eat all onions. Why did I will say once again? This is a case of neder bitos. Right? I made a mistake in the neder. I will say a case like this once happened, and Rabbi Meir actually allowed the vower to eat all onions. Good. Let's analyze. So the Gemara says, Hutra achron, ha'achra mutar, the kuldan asuran. So let's remember again, the Mishnah is jumping on the case over here, where I said, Konam, Lezeh, ulezeh, 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 ulezeh. So there are 10 people in front of me, and I say, I'm not getting hana from you, and from you, and from you, and from you, and from you. So we'll say, what's the halacha? If I'm matter the neder for the 10th guy, then who does that impact? The 10th guy and no one before him. So we'll say, Mantan, whose opinion is Amar Rava, Rabbi Shimon, the Amar, at Shomer Shvuah l'chol echad ve'echad. We'll say, ultimately, again, this is Rabbi Shimon, because Rabbi Shimon said that halacha l'maisa. We'll say, if you look at the Ran for just a moment, the Ran is right by where the Gemara starts. Mantana, Tinidiktani, Lazek Karban, Lazek Karban, Svichen Pesach l'chol echad ve'echad. Amar deli olam lo havi prata ela ki mitkar karban akol chad v'chad. In other words, we'll say, who is the opinion who says that halacha l'maisa, the individuals are considered to be linked, unless, of course, you explicitly distinguish them one from the other? Konam lezek karban, konam lezek karban, konam lezek karban. That is the opinion ultimately of Rabbi Shimon. Good. Konam yain shani toy. So we'll say, remember again, next case in the Mishnah. A person says, right, wine is usher to me. Why? Because wine is bad for the stomach. So we'll say, so what did the Mishnah say? Then they tell me, by the way, good wine or aged wine is actually good for the stomach. So we'll say, what's the halacha? Ultimately, again, the entire neder is void. So the Gemara says, v'seifok lei de'ein rat. Well, here's what's interesting. The way the Mishnah read was, I make a neder that I'm not going to drink wine. Right? Why? Because wine is bad for the stomach. Then I'm told that aged wine is good for is actually good for you. So the Gemara says, why do you have to get into that wine is good for me? I don't need to know that wine is good for me. I will say the only thing I need in order to make the neder void is what? That wine isn't bad. That's all. In other words, I made the neder with the understanding that wine has an adverse effect. All I need to know, all I need to be told is that wine doesn't have an adverse effect. You don't have to be told that it's good for you. To which the Gemara says, you're right. Rabbi Abba, va'od yafekatani. You're right. The reason the neder is void is because the neder is betos. It's a mistake. I made the neder because I thought wine was bad for me. It turns out it's not bad for me. That's why the neder is void, right? It's just a mistaken neder. The Mishnah just says, and by the way, there's also an additional component, which is what? Not only were you wrong, but you were so wrong. So wrong. Sounds like a marriage argument, right? In other words, not only were you wrong, but it's the opposite of what you said, right? It's the opposite of what you said. In other words, not only is it not bad for you, right? But lamaisa, it's actually good for you. So the Gemara goes weiter. The Gemara says, fine. The Gemara says, good. Konim batzal shani toim shabatzal. It's the same idea. So I'll say the onion case, right? Remember again, I made a neder. I'm not going to eat onions. Why? Because onions are bad for the heart. Then it turns out that what? The kufri onion is actually good for the heart. So once again, the seifach de'ein ra. I don't need onions to be good for me. I just need what? Onions not to be bad for the heart. As long as we can prove that as being true, then l'maisvat will say the entire neder is a toast. To which again the Gemara says, Rabbi Abba, va'od yafekatani. You're right. The reason the neder is ultimately void, is because I made a mistake. Onions are not bad. The Mishnah just adds in, and by the way, in addition to onions not being bad, a kufri onion could actually have a beneficial effect. Incredible. Mishnah. So here we go. Fascinating. Listen to this. Another way to make a Pesach. We can make a Pesach for a person using his own dignity or honor, or the dignity of his children. I will say, for example, Omrim lo la'adam. We can say to a person, so we'll say, by the way, just take a quick look at the Ran, because the Ran will help to frame this case. It's 3 lines up from before, the last 3 short lines in the Ran. Poskin la'adam b'chvod atzmo, hamadir is ishta. So we'll say, here's the case in question. A person makes a neder on his wife. Madir is ishto, achi gashana. So we'll say, so paradigmatic example of this, a man makes a neder, you cannot get any benefit from me. That's the neder he makes. Rabbi says, we saw before, what happens when you make such a neder like that? What happens when you make a neder like that? Triggers the obligation for divorce. So what happens? So look, finish the Ran. Poschin lo b'chvod atzma b'chvod banov v'lo chashni sheishakim mitoch habusha. So we'll say, now watch this. Go back to Mishnah. So we'll say, a man made a neder that his wife can't get hana from him. That triggers the need for a get. So you can create a Pesach by him. We say to him, Omru lo, ila yusiyodea. Now we say to the guy, Reuven will call him, right? So Reuven made a neder against his wife Rachel that she can't get hana from him. So now we say to him, Reuven, how'd you realize that as a result of this neder, you're going to have to divorce your wife, and therefore what? Shelamachra omrim alecha kachi vesto shalploni megaresh es nashav. They're going to say about you now tomorrow, this is Reuven. Reuven's a divorcer. Right? Reuven's a divorcer, right? Reuven's a guy who just leaves his family, divorces his wife. V'al benos secha, you own about your daughters, they're going to say, benos krushos. The daughters now are going to be the daughters of a divorcee. Ma ra'asan, iban shal eilis garish. People are going to cast aspersions on your wife. What did Mrs. Reuven, right? What did Rachel do? That's now causing Reuven to divorce her. So we'll say, what they tell Reuven is, listen, divorce now opens the door for people to speak badly about your family. Just an unfortunate, tragic reality. To this very day, a tragic reality. So you say to Reuven, had you realized that now you're opening the door for people to talk about you, for people to talk about your ex, for people to talk about your children. Right? Reuven, you're opening that door by making this decision. Right? Had you known that this was going to happen, would you still divorce your wife? What's the second wide line? Reuven says, you know what? Had I known this, I would not have made the neder. Right? Had I known this, I would not have made the neder. Hare ze mutar. So we'll say, ultimately, again, that is a proper Pesach, and that allows for the revocation or the annulment of the vow. So we'll say, so again, essentially what Reuven is saying is, had I known then what I know now, I would have never made this neder. That is a proper Pesach. Incredible. Konim shani nosies plonis ku'ura. We'll say, this is such a profound Gemara. Listen to this. Right? Reuven has suggested a shidduch with Rachel. And what happens? He doesn't want the shidduch. So we'll say, so what happens? He's so resistant to the shidduch that he does what? He makes a neder. And he articulates why he made the neder. I'm not marrying this woman. I'm not marrying Rachel. Why? Kura. She's not pretty. Kura means a stronger lashon, but I will say it's hard to use that lashon by any human being. Right? So again, she's kura. She's very unpretty. Right? Very unpretty. Vahari himna. Now it turns out she's very pretty. Or he says, ultimately, I'm not marrying her because Shchora, she's dark complexion. He wants a light complexion girl. Vahari hi levana, and she's light complexion. Or Kitsara, ultimately, and he says, I'm not marrying her because she's short, very ruka, but she's tall. So mutarba. We'll say in all of these cases, he's mutar to marry her. Now why? It's not because we'll say she was unpretty and then became pretty, or she was dark complexion, became light complexion, or she was short, became tall. Rather, Ella Shaned or tall. So we'll say, so just to be clear, we saw this in yesterday's daf. The Gemara quoted this Mishnah. This is the paradigmatic example of a neder talos. He made a mistake. Reuven says, I'm not marrying this girl. She's short. It turns out that she's tall. Not that there was like some miracle, right? You know, she said to him or something. It was right. It was just a mistake. Right? It was just a mistake. So we'll say, so this is a neder talos. And therefore, we'll say, what do you have to do? What do you have to do in order to repeal a neder talos? What do you have to do? Nothing. It falls on the side by itself. Now, we'll say, listen to this. So I will say there was once a story like this of a man who was proposed to shidduch with his niece. Now I will say, it sounds strange to us, but it was a common practice, right? Avraham Avinu married his niece, so I mean it was Avraham Avinu's niece. So I'll say so again. So there was once a shidduch that was proposed between a man and his niece, and the man did not want to marry her. Did not want to marry her. So we'll say to the point that he made a neder prohibiting himself from getting any hana from her. Okay? I will say, now from the story you see that the reason he made the neder, ultimately, again, because she wasn't pretty. She wasn't pretty. So listen to this. So Rabbi Shmuel brought the girl into his home, refuah, and he made her pretty. Also, you'll see in just a moment, this made her pretty. Amrlo Rabbi Shmuel b'ni mizuna darta. So listen to how beautiful this is. So Rabbi Shmuel then brought the girl before the man, and he said, "Tell me, is this the girl you didn't want to marry?" Amrlo lav. He said, "Rabbi, no, that's not her. That's not her." So Rabbi Shmuel made her look so beautiful. And ultimately, I suppose say, so, by the way, I just want to point out, this would also be pashtos be a neder taos. Vitirua. And ultimately, again, Rabbi Shmuel went ahead and permitted the man to marry her. Shabbos Vitur Rabbi Shmuel. Both Rabbi Shmuel Amar. Both listen to how beautiful this is. In that moment, Rabbi Shmuel cried and he said, Benos Yisrael na'os hein. So we'll say, we're going to see that again. Remember, Rabbi Shmuel, just to understand, so Rabbi Shmuel, this is Rabbi Shmuel Kohen Gadol, right? Rabbi Shmuel Kohen Gadol lived at the time of Hadrianic persecution. He was one of the Asara Harugei Malchus. So Rabbi Shmuel said, every Jewish woman is pretty. But what happens? Poverty, suffering, adversity sometimes deprives them of their beauty. So Rabbi Shmuel, it was just what a story. What a story, right? So Rabbi Shmuel sees a girl. Rabbi Shmuel sees a girl who is so beautiful. Rabbi Shmuel sees a girl who is so special, but because of adverse circumstances, her beauty has been stripped away. What does he do? He brings her into his home. Whatever he did, he fed her, he clothed her, he bathed her, whatever he had to do. But he restored her beauty to her. Rabbi Shmuel says, because Jewish women, Baruch Hashem, possess such an incredible beauty. It's just sometimes the adversity of their circumstances strip them of that beauty. Ukishemeis Rabbi Shmuel, when Rabbi Shmuel died, Hayu benos Yisrael nosos kina. Specifically, the Jewish girls cried. Va'omros benos Yisrael Rabbi Shmuel b'chana. Right, the Jewish girls said about Rabbi Shmuel, we have to cry over his loss. I will say, because Rabbi Shmuel took an interest in making sure that the Benos Yisrael, the Jewish girls, were restored to their beauty. V'chinu omer v'shal, Benos Yisrael ha'shal b'chena. Also, you see a similar thing by Shaul, that when Shaul died, it was said the daughters of Israel cried for us. So I'll say this was the Maisa with Rabbi Yishmael. Again, we're going to see a little bit more in just a moment. So the Gemara says, Maisa listar is the story. I don't understand. Is the story. The story seems to contradict the Gemara. Now, as Rabbi say, if you look at the Ran, 3 lines are from the bottom. Maisa listar, heich maybe Maisa listar devar of the meikara katani dekura venasis na asar ubasar achi katani Maisa. Rabbi say, so again, from the Mishnah, it sounds like if a woman was unpretty and then became pretty, in other words, then ultimately again, that's not a Pesach for the Neder, because Rabbi say, if she was unpretty and became pretty, what do we call that? No lud. B'pashtos, it seems to be the majority opinion says that you can't create a Pesach with no lud. So what's going on over here? To which the Gemara is supposed to listen to this. Chisrei mechsra. There's a piece missing. What's missing? Vachi katani. Rabbi Shmuel says no. Afilu ki'ura v'nasis na, shechora v'nasis lavana, kitsara v'nasis haruka. Rabbi Shmuel happens to hold as follows. Rabbi Shmuel holds that halacha l'maisa poschin b'nolad. That's what Rabbi Shmuel says, poschin b'nolad. That Rabbi say ultimately you can create a Pesach with brand new circumstances that have come about. That even if ultimately she wasn't pretty, but became pretty, she was dark complexion, but became light complexion, she was short, but somehow became tall, right? So the nice Rabbi Shmuel holds that even with no lud, new circumstances that were not present at the time the vow was made, ultimately that could create an opening, a Pesach for Hataras Nedarim. Incredible. And tells the story. Maise be'echad shenadar mibasacho. So, v'chnisu lebeis Rabbi Shmuel v'yafiyah. And we'll say, that's the story of no lud. That's the story of no lud. She wasn't pretty. She was not pretty beforehand. Right? And what happened? So in other words, we'll say, this wasn't a neder b'talos. It wasn't the pshat that the man thought, oh, she wasn't pretty. In other words, the Mishnah gives an example like that, of a man who says, I'm not marrying this woman because she's not pretty. Because she's not pretty. And then it turns out that what? He made a mistake. That's not this case. The case over here is, she wasn't pretty. And Rabbi Shmuel took an active interest in her, helped her, and made her pretty. This is a case of nolad. And Rabbi Shmuel allows, ultimately, again, hataras Nedarim through a Pesach of nolad. So the Gemara says, Tana, how did Rabbi Shmuel make her pretty? Rabbi says, it's so beautiful. Shein toteves haisalah, v'haisalah Rabbi Shmuel, shein shal zahav. So Rabbi say, she was missing a tooth. She was missing teeth. So Rabbi say, this is incredible, by the way. What did Rabbi Shmuel ultimately, again, do for her? Cosmetic dentistry. Because Rabbi say the truth is, again, if a person, this is, by the way, from dentists need to capitalize on this. This is good marketing from the daf. So Rabbi say, so again, because remember, what gives you, it's really true, what gives you confidence? On a most basic interpersonal level, what gives you confidence? Your smile. If you're self-conscious about your smile, you're self-conscious about your teeth, it's very hard to go ahead and give off an air of confidence. It's so dramatically true. So what happens? This girl was missing a tooth. She was missing a tooth. So what happens if a young woman is missing a tooth? So by Pashtos, she's not going to smile. If she's not going to smile, we'll say, what do people think of her? Introvert, unfriendly. Meanwhile, she's just totally self-conscious about her smile. So the Gemara says, so what did Rabbi Shmuel do for her? V'asla Rabbi Shmuel shein shal zav. Rabbi Shmuel gave her a gold tooth. Now, both say, but Pashtos, it must have been white gold. Right? Because, I don't know, like a gold tooth, I don't know. Sounds like a little, whatever. Now, I'll say, so Lamais again, it must have been a white gold tooth. But Lamais, I'll say, that's incredible. Rabbi Shmuel gave her cosmetic dentistry, gave her a smile, allowed her to feel confident. And I both say, by the way, according to this approach of the Gemara, the only thing Rabbi Shmuel did for her was what? Was just give her cosmetic dentistry. That was it. That in other words, when the man said, I'm not marrying her because she's unpretty, the unprettiness that he was probably referring to, it could have been that he saw the missing teeth, or it could have been that he just felt she never smiles. And if a human being, if a woman, man, anyone never smiles, there's no chen, there's no beauty. So Rabbi Shmuel, cosmetic dentistry, and ultimately, again, restored her beauty. Incredible. So the Gemara goes back there. Kishacha Rabbi Shmuel, when Rabbi Shmuel died, pasek aleyahu sapdana. So let's say there was a person who was eulogizing and said, Benos Yisrael al Rabbi Shmuel b'chena hama bishchen. So the eulogizer said, Jewish women, Jewish girls, you really have to cry for Rabbi Shmuel, because Rabbi Shmuel, we'll say, isn't this incredible? Rabbi Shmuel made sure that every single Jewish girl was pretty. To whatever he could do. But Shabbos say, because you know what the interesting thing about beauty is? So the interesting thing about beauty is Rabbi Shmuel recognizes the beauty is always there. Just sometimes the beauty needs to be tweaked. Right? Needs to be tweaked. Also, men need to be less shallow. But Lamaisa, right? But that's the unwritten part of the story. Right? But Lamaisa, again, the beauty is there, Rabbi Shmuel said. All you need is someone to take an active interest in you to help you. It's so beautiful. We'll say, by the way, I know we don't have time for it, but I just have to tell you something like that is just ridiculously, amazingly beautiful. And we'll say, on that phrase of Benos Yisrael Nos. And I will say, right, in the Mishnah, and then we're going to get into the stories. In the Mishnah, Rabbi Shmuel made a statement. What was his statement? Benos Yisrael Nos. Benos Yisrael are beautiful. Elosh ha'anios minavalton. How do you translate it? Anios, poverty, minavalton. Minavalton means almost like, nivel means like degrades them, diminishes their beauty. And I will say, get ready for this. The great tzaddik, Menachem Mendel of Riminov, said that there's another way to read that phrase. Benos Yisrael Nosim. Benos Yisrael, says the Rebbe, means also Klal Yisrael. Klal Yisrael, just like Bnei Yisrael means Klal Yisrael. Benos Yisrael also means, again, we're like children of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, sons and daughters to Hashem. Benos Yisrael, the Jew is beautiful. So what happens? Ela ha'anios. Get ready. Here it is. Ready? The anios, I will say, you spell anios with how? With an ayin. But I will say, it's vocalized the same way as if you put it with an aleph. I will say, what is anios with an aleph? Anios means egocentricity. Anios, the me, the anios, being about ani, making life all about me. egocentricity, self-centeredness. All I worry about is what I want to do, what makes me happy. I don't care about the other. I don't care about my fellow Jew. I don't even care about what Akash Baruch Hu wants. Ha'anios minavalton. You know what makes a person ugly? We know what degrades, what strips away all of the beauty is anius, me-ness, I-ness. When everything becomes about me, Abosai, is that not the most incredible thing you've ever heard in your life? Benos Yisrael Me'osein. Every single Jew is beautiful. There's no such thing as an unpretty Jew. There is no such thing. Every single Jew is beautiful. Every single Jew possesses such incredible spiritual beauty. The problem is, we often become so wrapped up in ourselves, the aniyus, with an aleph. Everything becomes about me, the egocentricity, the self-centeredness. And that's what removes all of my beauty. When everything in life becomes about me, when everything in life becomes about the I, that deprives me of every single piece of my spiritual beauty, which tells me that if I want to become beautiful, which we all want to become spiritually beautiful, I will say, it requires a profound focus on the other and a profound focus on the needs of the other and of the needs of the Rebbeinu Shalom. A little less I and a little bit more of the other. Incredible. Incredible. I would not be able to sleep tonight if I did not give that over to you before the end of this year. I would say, says the Gemara, great. And also tomorrow's daf is short. Yeah, very good. Very. We should just stop here and have coffee. So again, let's go like this. Let's go. Hahu d'amrli lidvisu. It will say, man said to his wife, Konam shiatnes li'ashit tetami tavshilech Rabbi Yehuda Rabbi Shimon. All right, so we'll say. So now we're gonna see some interesting stories about some fascinating marital dynamics. So there was a guy who said to his wife, right, you are not allowed to get any hana from me up until, right, unless you go ahead and serve your food to Rabbi Yehuda and to Rabbi Shimon. I will say, it could be that like the backdrop of this story might have been that she was such a terrible cook, right? That he needed other people to understand the suffering that he was going through, right? Or the other piece was he was just a jerk. In other words, that's not the Ran or the Rush, or that's my Rashi on this. I was going to say, sometimes again, and you'll see why that's important in just a moment. It could be that he was just a difficult guy. In any event, he makes this outrageous neder, which is an outrageous neder, right? Konam, you cannot get hana from me until you go ahead and serve your food that you cook to Rabbi Yehuda, to Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Yehuda time, Rabbi Yehuda ate the food. Fine. He said, Amar Kadach Homer, Umar laso shalom bin ish leishto, Amar Torah shemi shenichta b'kedushi, machal ha'mai marim, b'safek, vani al achaz kama v'kama. So I'll say, so what happened? Rabbi Yehuda said, fine, I'll eat it. Now, what was Rabbi Yehuda say? It's obviously very degrading, right? This lady walks into the base medrash with her pot of food. She says, here, taste this. So Rabbi Yehuda says, Rabbi Yehuda must have understood, or either she divulged him or he understood what was going on. He said, listen, in the case of Sota, whose woman suspected of adultery, her husband brings her to the Beis HaMikdash, right? And there's a whole process. And part of that process is what? There's a piece of parchment with the name of Hashem that is dissolved in water that she has to drink. If Hashem allows His name to be dissolved for the sake of affecting shalom between a husband and wife, then I could taste some food. I want to say a very just what we learned. No anios in this, right? A very humbling statement. If God could humble Himself to make shalom in a marriage, Rabbi Yehuda says, I could humble myself to help make shalom in a marriage as well. Rabbi Shimon lo time. Rabbi Shimon, on the other hand, would not go ahead and eat the food. He would not go ahead and do it. Right? He said, Yamusu kol b'nei almana. So let him literally again, let this entire family die. Let va'al yozus Shimon mimkomo. But Shimon is not going to go ahead and move from his place. So we'll say, Rabbi Shimon refused to eat the food. Now what's the pshat? So we'll say, if you take a look, va'od kihechi telo legarli lemindar. So we'll say, Rabbi Shimon felt that no, this was a disparagement to Talmidei Chachamim, which is a disparagement to Torah. In other words, we'll say, this is not just this guy embarrassing his wife, this is this guy humiliating Talmidei Chachamim as well. And Rabbi Shimon says, at a certain point in time, Talmidei Chachamim have to take a stand to preserve Kavod Torah. Because the moment that Kavod Torah is totally and fundamentally degraded is the moment that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is degraded. Torah itself is degraded. So Rabbi Shimon said, no, not going to do it. Not going to do it because it in and of itself is a degradation of Torah. And furthermore, again, if we do this, then ultimately, again, we are enabling and maybe even on some level encouraging this type of errant behavior. We'll say, take a look at the Rush for just a moment. The Rush is in the left-hand column. Val Yazashim Komo Lezalza B'Kvol Torah. So, Velo Dami Lashka Sota Shekinu LaBayla L'Shem Shamayim Al She'ara B'Shai Saber. And we'll say, Rabbi Shimon said, you can't compare this to Sota. Why? Because we'll say in Sota, there is some element of suspicion. Remember, again, we'll say, what's the process of Sota? The process of Sota is a man says to his wife, don't be alone with this guy. And then what? She's alone with him for long enough for something to have occurred. There's something going on over here. Maybe not adultery, but there's something wrong over here. There's a process, then that's triggered. Rabbi Shimon said, no, this is just totally inappropriate. And because it's totally inappropriate, I am not going to be a party to it. And therefore, again, he refused to teach. I will say, just pointing out, it is, who's right? Right? Who's right? So again, I will say, Rabbi Huda's position seems so beautiful. Willing to go ahead and essentially suffer indignity to go ahead and preserve Shalom Bayis. So I will say, but Rabbi Shimon is right also. There is the ability to suffer indignity, but there are some things that are just bigger than any individuals, like Kavod Torah, Kavod Tamidi Chachamim, Kavod Hashem. Those are pillars upon which our entire people are built. And the truth is, if they're degraded and eroded, Klal Yisrael is degraded and eroded. So I will say, so what's fascinating about this case is, you really needed both of them to each take their respective course of action. Because also I learned two things. Number one, to humble oneself for the sake of the greater good, but also sometimes to stand your ground for the sake of the greater good. Isn't that incredible? Two lessons. Sometimes I have to humble myself when that is necessary for the greater good of Klal Yisrael, in this case the Shalom of Klal Yisrael. Sometimes I have to stand my ground for the greater good of Klal Yisrael. Which one is right, when they're right, who they're right? I will say, obviously that's going to be a case-by-case situation. I will say, Shkoyach. All right, everyone, have a great day, everyone. A good Shabbos. No brachas or anything like that. Yeah. Yeah, give me a name. Yeah. Hopefully, that's wild.
Sorry. So by Rav Shmuel, so it might not be Nola because there was intrinsic beauty there to begin with. He just recognized this.